All right, guys, welcome back to our Cooper Book Club, Reading Between the Lines. We are still on chapter 17. We're going to finish it up today and probably start on 18. Last week, we were talking about using response and stimulus prompts. We went through verbal instructions, modeling, and physical guidance. And so now we're going to be talking about stimulus prompts. So we are on page 404. So applied behavior analysts frequently use movement, position, and redundancy of antecedent stimuli as stimulus prompts. For example, movement prompts can help a learner discriminate between a penny and a dime by pointing, tapping, touching, or looking at the coin to be identified. The coin discrimination task, the teacher could use a position prompt and place the correct coin closer to the student. Redundancy prompts occur when one or more stimulus or response dimensions are paired with the correct choice. So for that one, we're going to maybe change the color. So maybe the right answer is in color and all of the wrong answers are in black and white. Or you might change the size. So the one that is the correct answer is the bigger one and everything else is smaller. But just remember, we talked about faulty stimulus control. So you want to make sure that you're fading your prompts out quickly so that they don't become dependent on, oh, I know that it's always going to be the big one. And then you accidentally get that faulty stimulus control where they're just learning, oh, let me pick the big one, and they're not really learning what you're trying to teach them, which is how to identify an apple or whatever the case may be. Oh, yep, and then that's what they say next. To be aware of the risk of prompt dependency with the applications of response and stimulus prompts. Prompt dependency results from a failure to transfer stimulus control from the prompt to the desired stimuli. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. Stimulus control transfer, I love it. I love training on it because it is proven to be one of the most effective ways to teach a skill. So we are constantly making sure that we are transferring the control from the prompt to the actual concept that you're trying to teach. Factors affecting the development of stimulus control. So behavior analysts establish stimulus control with frequent differential reinforcement of behavior in the presence and absence of the SD condition. Effective differential reinforcement requires a consistent use of consequences that function as reinforcers. So additional factors, making sure that they have pre-attending skills, stimulus salience, masking, and overshadowing also will affect the development of stimulus control. So let's talk about all of those factors that will affect the development of stimulus control. So pre-attending skills. So it is required that they have that pre-attending skill before you try to really teach anything. For academics or social skills, the student should engage in orienting behaviors appropriate to the SDs in the instructional setting, such as pre-attending skills include looking at the instructional material, so making sure that they're able to scan the array, that they're able to attend to an instructor. All of those things are very important before you go in and start teaching something to anybody. So that's pretty self-explanatory, but just knowing that that is a very important part of developing that stimulus control and making sure that they're actually learning what you're trying to teach them. Okay, stimulus salience. The salience of a stimulus, the prominence of the stimulus in the learner's environment influences attention to it and ultimately the development of stimulus control. For example, Connors and colleagues included salient cues, specific room color, specific therapist, into the context of multi-element functional analysis. So I have seen this done. I don't know if anybody has experience with this. And so maybe you can provide us with some examples. But it's basically you're pairing certain stimulus with certain elements. So for example, in an FA, I've seen them do an FA where depending on what the function is, that's the color that they're wearing. So like if they are in the attention function, they're wearing a red shirt. And if they're in the escape function, they're wearing a green shirt. And so they're pairing that with that certain, I guess, environment or that function. So results suggest that salient cues facilitated the efficiency of functional analysis by producing faster and clearer outcomes in the presence of salient cues than in the absence of them. So they know what condition they're in based off of the shirt that you're wearing. So that this is what they're kind of explaining about salience cues. The common use of the term salience, as we used it here, when we stated the salience isn't a property of a stimulus, it's actually the property of an organism's behavior with respect to the stimulus. We could say in another way, although a behavior analyst can change various aspects, such as size, position, and color of a stimulus in an effort to increase its salience, whether or not salience is achieved is determined by the learner's differential responding or lack thereof of those changes. Does anybody have any questions or any examples of stimulus salience? I want to try. So you're basically pairing something else with that function or that behavior to make it more salient, is what they're trying to say. Okay, let's see. Over-selective stimulus control, also called stimulus over-selectivity. The range of discriminative stimuli or other stimulus features controlling the behavior is extremely limited. Some children with autism or intellectual disabilities focus on a minute feature of an object or a person rather than the whole. So that can be a barrier to learning for them, right? Because they might be focused on a certain thing, and they're not able to attend to what you're trying to teach them. And I've seen this happen so many times. I can give you guys this really funny example. So I had a client that really liked the color brown, okay? That was like their favorite color. And so anything that was brown, like that's all that they cared about. So if they saw, I don't know, a brown door, they would just be staring at the brown door, you know, like just funny things like that. And so I had an RBT trying to like teach him something. And when it comes to like him having to respond to whatever the question is, he was like, Miss Renee, you're brown. And so the whole time he was just looking at her skin and like just in awe of that. And so he wasn't even paying attention to what she was asking him. So that can be a barrier for our kids sometimes, is that they focus on one certain feature or maybe something else in the environment. And so it can be a struggle to gain that stimulus control over what you're trying to teach them. I just thought that was a funny little example of kind of what that would look like. Okay, let's see their example. So this selective stimulus control interferes with the child's understanding of what a guitar is. Okay, for example, if shown a guitar for the first time, a child might focus on the sound hole and not consider anything else about the instrument, such as its size, shape, or other parts, or even the sound it makes. This selective stimulus control interferes with the child's understanding of what a guitar is, the totality of its parts and functions. So over-selective stimulus control hinders a child's ability to interpret relevant meaning from the environment and learn new concepts and academic and language skills. Okay, so basically that's going to be one of our barriers. Teaching learners to emit more elaborate observing responses and improve the performance of learners and match to sample. Okay, let's look at this example that they give us. In typical matching procedures, the sample stimuli are presented first. The student makes an observing response to the samples, and then an array of comparison stimuli is presented, one of which is correct in relation to the samples. Observing responses to sample stimuli may be classified as non-differential or differential. With non-differential observing responses, the responses to sample is the same on every trial, and only discrimination required is between the presence versus absence of the stimuli. By contrast, differential observing responses, DORs, include behavioral requirements that verify discrimination of stimulus features that differ among the samples. For example, if the sample stimuli are pictures, one type of DOR would be to name the pictures aloud. Okay. So they're using multiple controls. So they might be naming them as they're putting them down and then asking him, touch apple or something like that. And like a good example of stimulus control transfer with that situation or that scenario would be like if I lay 3 cards out and I tell them touch apple, and then they touch it and I'm like, good job. And so now for my stimulus control transfer, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to say, what is it? And then he's going to have to say apple. So now basically what I did is I transferred the control from one SD to another. So first I had him receptively identify, and then I switched it to expressively identify. And so because of that shift that you did, it helps them to learn and understand the skill better. So whenever you guys are teaching, making sure that you're always using stimulus control transfer to ensure that they're really, truly understanding what you're asking them. So does anybody have any experience with stimulus control transfer as a form of intervention or teaching, or what are they called? Prompting, I guess. I don't know if you guys do that, but you really should. It's really beneficial. And another example that I always give is like for listener responding. So let's say the learner really struggles with responding to instruction. So what you can do for those type of learners is you can transfer the control from a motor imitation to a listener response. So what you'll do is you'll tell them, do this, and then they do it. Good job. And then without me doing it, I'm going to say, clap hands. And then he claps his hands. So what I did there is I just transferred the control from my motor imitation to his listener response, and therefore making his little brain make those two connections. And it's like kind of helping them to get there, if that makes sense. So just make sure that you guys are using those when you're programming for your clients, when you do become a BCBA, or that you're teaching your RBTs how to do so. Any questions so far? I just talk so much. Okay, stimulus blocking and overshadowing. Stimulus blocking and overshadowing are methods of decreasing the salience of stimuli. So in stimulus blocking, sometimes called masking, even though one stimulus has acquired control over the behavior, a competing stimulus can block the evocative function of that stimulus. So for example, a student may know the answers to a teacher's question, but will not respond in the presence of the peer group, which in this example is competition of different contingencies of reinforcement, not just an antecedent stimulus, and it makes it harder to attend to the relevant SD. So what do you think you would do in that situation? So he answers teachers' questions, but not in the presence of a group.
Can you repeat that question?
So, okay, so we're gonna be using stimulus blocking. So for example, a student may know the answers to a teacher's question, but will not respond in the presence of a peer group, which in this example is a competition of different contingencies of reinforcement, not just an antecedent stimulus, and it makes it harder to attend to the relevant SD. So the peer group is basically blocking, I guess, the correct response. And so maybe in that situation, if you're teaching a new skill, then you might
Get
want
rid
to.
of the people.
What'd you say? Get rid of the
Would
people?
you just, yeah, like, would you just have it be a one-on-one private session?
Yeah, so I would do that in the beginning, and then I would try to use shaping to like slowly start like introducing more peers, because that probably is the end goal is for him to be able to respond in a peer group. So you will probably want to shape your way there, but if you know that that's the contingency that's like blocking his learning or his ability to respond, then you can use your like antecedent strategies and be like, okay, well, we're gonna go learn in the other room or something like that. Okay, and overshadowing. The most salient component of a compound stimulus arrangement controls responding and interferes with the acquisition of stimulus control by more relevant stimulus. So let's see the example for overshadowing. Okay, so Dillinger and Lerman found that pictures and text delayed acquisition of sight word reading by children with developmental disabilities, suggesting that pictures overshadowed the text and may have interfered with learning. Okay, so overshadowing. The pictures, so we're trying to teach them sight words, but the sight words had pictures. So the pictures were overshadowing what you were truly trying to teach, which was them to learn to respond to the sight word only. So in that situation, in order to avoid that overshadowing, then you would just want to get rid of those pictures, right? What's wrong? Put her in her house. Sorry, my dog ate my daughter's toy, and so she can't cry.
When I think of overshadowing, I think about like if you're studying in front of a TV and like that the TV being in front of you, like to me, because I get really distracted. Like if I'm trying to study, I can't be in front of a TV because the TV overshadows my learning, my studying. So that's another way of like I think about it.
Perfect.
Real life situation.
Yeah, I love that example. Does anybody else have an example? She gave a real life example. So maybe if somebody wants to try to give like a client example where something else is overshadowing their ability to learn what it is you're trying to teach them.
Like if something has too many lights or if it looks too fun, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, that's a good one. Or maybe like things that make sounds. Like I don't know why I just have such a problem with sound toys. But like when they make, like if it's like singing over and over, and you're
Yeah.
trying to teach him like to identify bus, but now all he's doing is singing Old MacDonald, which is playing from the bus or something like that. So that could be a good one too. Okay, well, you guys get it. You guys get overshadowing. What about masking, Sam? Do you have a good example for masking? Let me get on my notes because I know I have a good example.
So when I think of masking, like my real life situation, when I was like, let's say when I was a dancer, I wouldn't mind dancing in front of my peers or my dancing peers or my dance instructor. But however, I wouldn't dance in front of my non-dancing peers or something because like, I don't know, maybe like, oh my goodness, I don't know if that's a good example. Because like I know how to dance, but if someone else tells me outside of the dance studio like to do it, but like okay, I act like I don't know what to do. I don't know if it's like maybe like something that it's just a different environment. I guess I'm not generalizing to other people, if that made sense.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anybody else want to try masking?
I guess I'm kind of confused about the word masking because I know with popular use of it, masking means like if you're someone that's on the spectrum, you learn to mask so that you can fit in. But that's not the same masking that we're talking about, right?
No, not really.
No. Stimulus, maybe try to think of it as stimulus blocking.
Something in the environment, it's like affecting like the function of the behavior, if that made sense. If that made sense, I hope that made sense. Oh my goodness.
No,
Yeah.
it makes sense. It's just I'm having difficulty like processing it, like in terms of the client's situation, like when we would use it or when I just can't stop thinking about masking, like trying to fit in.
Yes, I know what you're saying. And a lot of times, like ABA and common language doesn't make sense. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. Like how we talk about like positive reinforcement being spanking. Other people would be like, well, no, that's negative, you know, and so it's some things maybe don't match.
Yeah.
So maybe
But
try to think of it.
masking, like if you're masking a stimulus, that means you're hiding a stimulus, right?
So, okay, one stimulus has acquired control over the behavior. Oh, okay. So,
Oh, like a water bottle. Like if my cat sees a water bottle, he instantly like tries to find cover. And if I'm trying to teach him how to toilet train, if I accidentally have a water bottle in the environment, that might hinder his performance.
yes, because now he's going to run away, right?
Yes, because of the water bottle, the stimulus in the environment.
Blocks the evocative function of the stimulus. So before it used to evoke the behavior. If you said, go potty, the SD go potty, the cat would go potty. But now because you have a water bottle, it's like, and runs away. So yeah, that can be a good one. Or I guess like in Sam's example, they're like, her teacher says,
Oh yeah, the TV.
the teacher says, do a dance, and she's like dancing, but then she sees all these other peers or like maybe a guy she has a crush on, and then the teacher's like, all right, do a dance, and she's like she freezes up.
And the guy would be the stimulus that's masking the
The
learning.
behavior, yeah, it's blocking the evocative function that the SD used to the SD used to evoke a response, but because of something else, it's
Okay.
no longer evoking that response.
Got it. I'm getting it. Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate y'all spending time on this.
No, it's good. And that's how we learn. And that's what I always tell all the girls is like, that's how I studied for the exam, is that I had study groups, and then we would have to explain it to each other in different ways, because you might understand it differently than I do. And so if we're able to like explain it in different ways, it also makes it make sense to you. You know, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. So it's good. It's good that you guys are asking questions and trying to figure it out together. Applied behavior analysts need to recognize that blocking and overshadowing can hinder the development of stimulus control and apply procedures that reduce these effects. Okay, so now it's going to tell us what we can do in order to reduce the effects of blocking and overshadowing and stimulus blocking and overshadowing. Okay, so these are probably very important, so we'll highlight those. So we're going to rearrange the environment. So maybe you're going to lower the window shade, removing distractions, changing the seating arrangement. So using those antecedent strategies like, oh, I know this client always looks out the window when I'm trying to run DTT. So maybe we'll move that client to a non-window room or something like that. And we'll only use window as a reinforcer, or I don't know, that can be an example. Making instructional stimuli appropriately intense. So providing a rapid pace of instruction, many opportunities to respond, an appropriate level of difficulty, and opportunities to set goals. Okay, so making sure that you are providing learning opportunities that are equivalent with their abilities. You know, like if it's too easy, they're probably not gonna wanna respond. Too hard, also not gonna wanna respond. So you wanna make sure that it's like right there at their level. Consistently reinforcing behavior in the presence of instructionally relevant discriminative stimuli. That's super important, right? Is making sure that you're always reinforcing the correct response that you want, and not just like sometimes, because then I think I made this up, but I tell my RBTs, you're blurring your contingencies, because like now it's not making sense to them because you only reinforce them sometimes, but then some other times you forget. And so now like you're blurring your contingency. I don't know, that was the best way I could explain it. I don't think that's like an ABA proper term, but that's just the way I explain it to them. So making sure that you're consistently reinforcing the behavior in the presence of that certain SD that you're trying to teach. Okay, that was a good one. That was a good page. Are we on to chapter 18? No. Okay, well, we're on transferring stimulus control, which is my favorite thing. Okay, so applied behavior analysts should provide response and stimulus prompts as supplementary antecedent stimuli only during the acquisition phase of instruction. With the reliable occurrence of behavior, applied behavior analysts need to transfer stimulus control from the response and the stimulus prompts to the naturally existing stimulus. We will transfer control by gradually fading stimuli in or out, gradually presenting or removing antecedent stimuli, and eventually the natural stimulus, a partially changed stimulus, or a new stimulus will evoke the response. So making sure that you're properly fading the prompts from your very controlled and strategic teaching instruction to the natural world and naturally occurring. An example can be like imitation. So you're teaching them to imitate you with 2 cars. Do this, crashing 2 cars together. Do this with 2 blocks together. Okay, cool. You've taught them in a very controlled environment. And so now making sure that you are fading all of this stuff out. So eventually fading out the do this, or, you know, like maybe being out in the playroom or in the real world and you're just like playing with the pretend kitchen and you're not telling them to do this, but you're just like maybe showing them like, ooh, cooking, I'm cooking on the stove. And then they're like, oh, and then they come over here and start cooking. And so that we're making sure that we're transferring the stimulus control and fading out all of the other controlling factors and just getting them to naturally imitate you. Because that's our end goal, is not to make them like robotic and only respond like whenever I say do this, but him being able to imitate my behavior when I'm somewhere else, or him being able to imitate the behavior of his peers and not just me. So just making sure that you are using all those fading and transferring and all of that to all different types of stimulus and responses. Okay, basic research. Terrace, influential research on transfer of stimulus control using fading and superimposition of stimuli provides classic examples of transferring stimulus control. In studies, parents taught pigeons to make red, green, and vertical horizontal discriminations with a minimum of errors. His use of techniques for gradually transferring stimulus control was called errorless learning. To teach a red-green discrimination, Terrace presented the SD red light at the beginning of discrimination training before the SD green light had stimulus control over the pigeon's response. The initial introduction of the red light was with low illumination and for brief time intervals. During successive presentation of the stimuli, Terrence gradually increased the intensity of the red light and the duration it was illuminated until it differed from the green light only in hue. Okay, so for that one, what is that called? Where they're changing the intensity, changing the color of the light. Do you guys remember what type of prompt?
Stimulus.
Yeah, we just talked about it. What was it? It was a stimulus prompt, a specific type of stimulus prompt.
So is
Stimulus
it
stimulus?
stimulus control?
Is it redundancy?
Wait.
Is a redundancy.
Sorry, I have to go back. I can't ask a question and not give an answer. It's going to kill my brain. Or was it salience? Wait, no, not salience. Is it? Okay, maybe I'll just keep going and then I'll get back to it. It's gonna make me crazy. Okay. Basic research. So transferring the control from one SD to another. And then gradually fading your prompts to make sure that they are able to respond to the SD without the difference in hues, or I guess like brightness. Produced landmark studies showing that transfer of stimulus control with few incorrect responses was possible with human learners, which provided the foundation for developing effective procedures to transfer stimulus control from response prompts to natural stimuli and the applied concept. So this is like our whole like reason for teaching is just making sure that we are transferring that control from the response prompts to the actual correct answer and then out into the natural world.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Can someone give me, besides Cooper, can someone else give me like a real life example of errorless learning? Because I'm always screwing that up. Like one day I would know and the next day I don't. So like besides Cooper, I need a different example.
Okay, so I've actually just had a training on this with one of my we call them BIs. And it's because I have a new learner and he doesn't have all the prereq skills yet, like attending and scanning and instructional control, all of that, you know? And so for him, we have to use errorless learning. And so errorless learning is basically you're doing most to least. That's the way I try to think about it, is that you're not really allowing them time to make an incorrect response. You're just automatically going in with the full physical. So like, for example, for him, we might be teaching him to imitate clapping or something like that. So for that one, we would say, do this. And then if you have a silent prompter behind them, you would have them do it for him, or you would quickly grab his hands, do it for him, and then be like, yay, that's doing it. And you would be fading your prompts the other way. So you would be like, do this, and then maybe next time you just tap him on the little elbows, but you don't allow them to make an error. So that's why it's called errorless, and it's usually going from most to least.
Okay, someone gave me that example too before, and I keep forgetting about that example. I don't know why it's not sticking. But that's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you want, like later off the recording, we can like watch a video or something, because that's usually how I show them, is like showing them like errorless learning videos. But yeah, so so most to least. We use most to least prompts to transfer stimulus control from response prompts to natural stimulus whenever the participant does not respond to the natural stimulus or makes an incorrect response. So for example, for that learner, if we didn't do errorless learning and we said do this, it would just be, my graphs would just be 0 for the rest of my life. So that's why we have to go in with errorless and then fade ourselves out the other way, so that way we can see like progress and they know what you're trying to what you're asking them to do and all of that. So to apply most to least response prompts, the analyst physically guides the participant through the entire performance sequence and then gradually reduces the amount of physical assistance provided as training progresses from trial to trial and session to session. So depending on your BCBA or the kind of BCBA you are, you will either leave this up to your technician to fade themselves out, but it's like kind of iffy because you never know if they're going to or if they know how. And so then your little baby may become prompt dependent. So you might want to program for errorless learning and be like, I don't know, for a week we do full physical and then next week we do partial. I don't know. You want to like make sure you're monitoring it and not always leaving it up to them, because they may or may not do it correctly. So just making sure that you are like aware of that. Not everybody thinks like you. So I've learned that you have to be very, very specific. So if I'm not going to be there for a couple of days, I'll be like, okay, you can do full physical till the end of this week. And then next week, do partial or whatever. Or you can even put it within your goal. So it'll be like motor imitation clap hands with a full physical prompt. And then once he masters that across 3 days, then I'm going to open the next one. Motor imitation, partial physical, clap hands. And then I do that one for 3 days or something like that. So those are things that you're going to have to think about as a BCBA and train your staff to do. Graduated guidance. The analyst provides physical guidance as needed. By using graduated guidance, she will immediately start to fade out the physical prompts and transfer stimulus control. Graduated guidance begins with the analyst following the participant's movements closely with their hands, but not touching the participant, and then increasing the distance of her hands from the participant by gradually changing the location of the physical prompt. For example, if the analyst used physical guidance for the participant's hand movement of zippering a coat, she might move the prompt from the hand to the wrist, to the elbow, to the shoulder, and then no physical contact. So graduated guidance provides an opportunity for immediate physical prompts as needed. Okay, so basically graduated guidance is the fading of a physical prompt. And you might also program for these. So I have used certain like type of graduated guidance for text, right? So maybe in the beginning, I have to hand over hand, give it to the person. And then maybe next time I just give them a little nudge with the elbow, and then maybe the shoulder, and then slowly that silent prompter in the back just completely leaves. Or for responding to names, I have them tap the learner. So I might be behind you and I'll say, Samantha, and I have like your favorite toy, and I tap you on the shoulder, and then you turn around, I give it to you. Yay, good job. That's or whatever. Yay, thank you for looking at me, or something like that. I give it to you, and I try the tapping on the shoulder. And then maybe next time I'm going to program it where I just say Samantha and I'm directly behind you, and then I slowly start like moving the distance between us. So stuff like that. Least to most prompts. So this is the one that you want to use most often, especially for people who are already been in ABA, they're used to responding to instructors. If it's like something easy that's probably already in their repertoire and you don't really need a full physical, you always want to make sure that you're going in least intrusive, unless it's like a new skill and you feel like it's necessary to do most to least. I try to avoid most to least with like older learners, because you want to preserve their dignity and stuff like that. Like, he's 15 years old. He doesn't need me to hand over hand for him, or, you know, like stuff like that. So there's always other things to consider when you're choosing what type of transferring method you're using, which is like the age of your learner, their level of understanding, their prerequisite skills, all of that. Okay, so least to most is where we do the least intrusive first and then work our way up. So you might give them 30 seconds to respond. If they don't respond, or 3 seconds to respond. If he doesn't respond, then I might go into gesture. If the gesture doesn't work, then maybe I'll model it. The model doesn't work, then maybe I'll do like a partial, and then full, and so on, depending on what skill you're teaching, right? So if it was like a listen or respond, then you will transfer your prompts verbally. So it might be like a partial verbal, a full verbal, and so on. And gradually fading yourself out because you want to be least intrusive as possible in order to give them that independence. Okay, I think we finished chapter, oh my God, there's some more. Time delay. Goodness. Okay, so most to least should be the default prompting technique when a child's learning history is unknown. If errors have been found to evoke problem behavior and impede in learning, most to least or most to least with time delay is preferred. So these are important things to know. I just told you guys these based off of like the top of my head, but you need to know this yourself for like mock questions. I'm assuming for test questions, I don't know. Least to most may be preferred for students who have shown rapid skill acquisition with this technique. In all cases, progress should be monitored to ensure errors don't impede on learning. Okay, so always make sure that you are using those prompting guidelines when selecting your prompting techniques, like I told you guys. Time delay. So we're inserting small increments of time between the presentation of the instructional stimulus and the response prompt across trials, resulted in the learner anticipating the correct response. A time delay procedure begins with simultaneous presentation of the target stimulus, example, a picture of a dog, and response prompt, teacher says dog. After the student has responded correctly for several trials, the teacher inserts a delay between the instructional stimulus and the response prompt until the student emits the unprompted correct response. Okay, so for that one, in the beginning, you might be like, what is it, dog? What is it, dog? What is it, dog? Good job. And then you're gonna slowly start to fade the quickness of your prompt. So you're like, what is it? And then you stay quiet. So now I'm not giving him the correct answer as quickly as I was before, because now I know that he's starting to get it and I want him to emit the response without me having to prompt him. Time delay is considered errorless learning because students often make few or no errors as control of responding shifts from the contrived prompt to the instructional stimulus. Two various time delays are progressive time delay and constant time delay. So I'm assuming you need to know the difference between these time delays. So progressive time delay starts with simultaneous presentation of the natural stimulus and the response prompt. 0 second delay. Oh, so I'm saying it and presenting it at the same time. Usually the teacher will use several 0-second trials before extending the time delay. The following number of 0-second trials will depend on the difficulty and functioning level of the participant. Teacher will gradually and systematically extend the time delay, often in 1-second intervals. With constant time delay, after the student has responded correctly to several 0-second delays, presentation of response prompts follows the instructional stimulus by a predetermined and fixed delay. So usually 3 or 4 seconds for all subsequent trials. Okay, so for progressive, that one you're basically using your shaping, right? You're doing like 1 second, 2 second, 3 second. So for progressive, we're like extending the time. And then with constant, it's just like, okay, 3 seconds every time. We're no longer going to give them the answer. We're going to wait 3 or 4 seconds. And that's mostly what people use. Like I use, I guess, constant time delay. I didn't really realize that it had a word. But during like teaching or intervention, I write in my program, like allow 3 to 4 seconds for responding. If the client responds within 3 to 4 seconds, it's correct. If they don't respond within 3 to 4 seconds, then begin your prompting teaching trials. So that's, I guess, an example of using that. We can use it for a variety of skills, such as sight word, reading, spelling, number identification, chain tasks such as food preparation, purchasing, vocational and leisure skills. Time delay has been used effectively by peer tutors and parents. Heckman et al. Reported that implementing progressive time delay immediately reduces rates of disruptive behavior associated with a task previously taught with least to most prompting. For reviews of research on time delay, see this article. Okay, I think we should stop there because it's 8:11. And then we'll go into stimulus fading. So transferring the stimulus control with fading techniques. That will be fun. And then I guess we'll just stay on chapter 17 forever. All right, I'm gonna pause the recording.